T-90M is currently the most modern and the most advanced main battle tank in active service with the Russian armed forces. T-14, despite what Russian media is saying, is not being used, nor is it in active service. Now, there is a lot of conflicting information about the performance of the T-90M in Ukraine. Some people say it's doing amazing, some say it is doing horrible. Well, for today, I decided to analyze the production of the tank, that is, how many tanks has Russia been putting out since the start of the war, and how many of the total number have been lost. And by that, I don't mean I will just give you the numbers, there is a lot that needs to be covered here. I will not talk about the actual design problems of the tank, because I have already done a video on that. We will take a look at their production, losses, and how the tanks are actually being used. The fog of war makes it challenging to find reliable information on the topic, but fortunately ground news makes it easier to look for the facts and gain a deeper understanding of what is being reported about the war in Ukraine. Ground News is an app and website that aggregates all global media in one place, enabling readers to compare coverage and quickly drill down into a story to find out what's really going on. For every story, you get a quick visual breakdown of the news outlets covering it, their political bias, how factual the source is, which entity owns the source, and which countries are covering the story. Let's take the story about the US sending cluster munitions to Ukraine. We can check which side of the political spectrum covers the story more, as well as how each side words the story. With ground news, you can follow breaking news on a specific topic, like Ukraine, war, etc. Ground news lets you develop a well-rounded world view by allowing you to see every side of every story with access to international perspectives that are hard to find, which is one of the main reasons I use it. If you want to try it out for yourself and make reading the news easier and more enjoyable, you can subscribe through my link at ground.news/redeffect for a special offer of 30% off their Vantage plan. This unlocks all features for as little as $5 per month, and also helps support my channel and gives you the keys to this independent media venture striving for news transparency. Let's first start with the production. According to the Military Balance 2022, before the invasion, Russia had 67 T-90M tanks in active service. Now, they have actually been producing dozens of tanks every couple of months since then, and I have gathered all of the official information about the deliveries of T-90M tanks to the Russian armed forces starting from the beginning of the war until now. You have to keep in mind that, based on the information I could find, one batch delivery is usually 10 or 11 tanks for Russians, so we will use this information to determine the production numbers at the end. First delivery since the start of the war was on the 17th of May 2022, with the tanks being blessed by a priest. Emperor protects. Next delivery in 2022 was on the 4th of August. These tanks, like the last batch, were delivered with summer camouflage on them. These tanks were later seen in September being delivered to the troops, and in October in training and getting prepared for deployment. Are these tanks from the first or the second batch? It's hard to tell, since, as I said, both batches had camo applied to them. There was a video from September where it was also claimed a new batch of tanks was delivered. But according to Alexei Klopotov, this is the same batch as the one from August. He lives in the same area where the factory that produces the tanks is located, and he said that at the time the weather was cloudy and rainy, while in the video it is clear and sunny, and it would make sense. How did it take them just a month to deliver a new batch when it took them 3 months before that? Until the end of 2022, there would be no new batches delivered, but at the start of 2023, on the 12th of January, a new batch was delivered. And this time it was a bit different. The tanks from this batch had Contact 1 ERA mounted on the lower front plate of the tank. Images of T-90M tanks with different roof ERA started appearing soon after, so I would imagine this was the first batch that had this new roof ERA implemented. Now, the next batch of tanks was delivered in May, but something really doesn't add up. On the 5th of April 2023, Shoigu went to inspect the equipment for ground forces, and in the video there are much more than 10 or 11 T-90M tanks. From my count, there are around 30 of them, and every single one of them has a new roof ERA and ERA on the lower front plate. Now, it is possible that these tanks could be some of the tanks produced prior to the invasion that got refurbished after the last delivery. Nowhere in the video or any article related to it is it stated that these tanks are all brand new tanks. we just see them in the video. It is possible that the tanks are new, it is possible that they are old. The problem is that any article talking about the deliveries never mentions the numbers being delivered, they just state new batch, so we can't know anything for certain. Now, as I already said, the next batch was delivered in May, that is, on the 9th of May 2023, and this time they actually said it's 11 tanks, so at least we know the precise amount of tanks for this delivery. And the latest batch got delivered not too long ago, on the 18th of July, together with the upgraded T-92B tanks that received the cheap 1PN96 thermal sight that I talked about some time ago. This batch is really interesting. Why? Well, because they actually installed relict ERA on the back of the tanks. Yeah, remember how I constantly talk about the poor reverse speed of T-90M and how the crew needs to turn the entire tank around in order to quickly move away, exposing the weak rear armor? Yeah, it seems that Russians are well aware of that too. It's just that they decided to implement a horribly cheap solution, if you can even call it that, rather than addressing the actual problem, that is, the tank's transmission. So, for production, we have 10 or 11 tanks in May 2022, 10 or 11 tanks in August 2022, 10 or 11 up to 30 tanks in January 2023, 11 tanks in May 2023, and 10 or 11 in July 2023. That would give us at least 51 in total of T-90M tanks produced since the start of the war, or 55 if we consider that each batch was 11 tanks. Now, if we consider that all those 30 tanks are new, then it would be around 70 tanks, but since we did not receive any information about the delivery of so many tanks, I'd wager to say that the rest of the tanks in that video are upgraded tanks that have been produced before. So, if we take the number of 55 since the start and 67 prior to the war, we come up with the figure of 122 tanks. So, any way you put it, the total is around 120 T-90M tanks produced since the tank entered service until today, which would be late July 2023. I know that some of you saw some news about Russians producing 200 T-90M tanks some time ago, but the information about 200 tanks came from a very unreliable source. The person in question is not related to anyone involved with production and procurement of these tanks, so this information should be taken with a massive grain of salt. I'm not saying that my estimate is 100% correct, but this is all the info available on the production numbers I could find. No other information about deliveries exists. Now that we have the estimate of the production numbers, what are the losses of the T-90M tanks in Ukraine? Well, according to Oryx, Russia has lost 27 T-90M tanks since the start of the war. And while this number is fairly accurate, I do have some nitpicks that I want to cover. Hey everyone, while I was doing research for this video, 27 tanks were indeed listed, 18 of which were listed as destroyed. But while I was finishing up the video, I noticed that one of the destroyed tanks got removed from the list, most definitely because it was a double count, making it 26 in total. I wanted to say this because I did some calculations based on this number, but I will put some corrections on the screen while I'm talking about them. Just wanted to point that out. All the tanks you're currently seeing on the screen are undeniably destroyed, but then we come to this one. It is labeled as destroyed, while that is not necessarily the case. The fire burning on the tank is coming from the external fuel tank, and the explosions with a lot of smoke going off are undoubtedly the smoke launchers going off from the fire. There is also this other one labeled as destroyed, where it apparently got hit by a javelin, where the first shot missed. The tank was obviously hit in the engine deck, and there is no smoke coming from the crew compartment, only from the back and what appears to be the turret bustle ammo storage. Only thing I would change there is change them from destroyed to damaged. Now, talking about the damaged tanks, I've never seen those as absolute losses from either side. That is why I never counted any of the recoverable Leopards as losses when I did a similar analysis on the Leopard 2 losses not too long ago. Problem with this, especially with drone pictures and videos like this, is that we don't know where the tanks have been damaged and if they can be recovered. A drone picture of a damaged tank doesn't mean the tank is lost. Case in point, some of you who have been tracking the losses might remember this T-90M being labeled as damaged loss a while ago. A bit later it got confirmed that the tank that got flipped over is also T-90M, and it got confirmed by Russians because they recovered both of those tanks. The flipped T-90M had practically everything on the turret's roof gone or completely damaged. Oryx obviously removed that, so why did they exactly bring this up? Well, it tells us two things. First, Oryx does remove these tanks when it is confirmed that they have been recovered, and second, just because we have a picture of a damaged tank from a drone, that does not mean that the tank is lost. It quite possibly can be lost, but it is not guaranteed, and I believe that is the reason why such tanks are on the list. It is better that way. It is better to have damaged tanks listed until we can confirm they have been recovered. But my point is, just because we don't have confirmation about it, we should not bluntly take drone pictures of damaged tanks as 100% confirmation of a loss. This goes for both sides. People screaming about Leopard 2 losses every time they see a video of a Lancet striking a tank. Yes, Ukraine lost a gazillion Leopard 2s, I saw it get hit. And again, this is not about Oryx. There is an absolute valid reason why these tanks are there. This is about people taking these numbers for granted without looking further into them. So, now that we got that out of the way, how many T-90M tanks were actually lost? Well, if we take the number of destroyed tanks, it's either 16 or 18, depends if you want to count the ones I pointed out, and 2 captured. Those are absolute, irrecoverable losses. That would be either 18 or 20 complete losses, and with the damaged ones it would be 27 in total. That is, for now. I have no doubt in my mind we will see more of these tanks lost in the future. It is bound to happen. That would give us a loss percentage of around 22 to 23% if we count all as lost, or 13 to 15% if we count only the destroyed ones. When we compare the losses to other tanks, such as T-72B3 for example, we will see that this is not a bad number. But T-90Ms are not being used as much as other, especially older models, are. In early war, T-90Ms were being used very sparingly. We mostly saw them being used in indirect fire or as support units. It's only later on that we actually saw them actively being used in attacks like other tanks are being used, and Russians are using them more and more often in such roles, most likely because the production numbers are rising. We have confirmation of 30 tanks being made since the start of 2023, while there were only 20 confirmed for the entire 2022. Therefore, it is not surprising to see they have been more lenient with their use. But that is all judging from the videos we get. We can't draw a clear conclusion on their performance because, well, we can only judge it by what we can see, and we are not seeing that much. It could either be because Russians are not using them that often, or because they don't want to share videos of their most advanced tanks, because they maybe don't want anyone to know where they are being used. Who knows? It's just me theorizing a bit. But that would be all. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like my content, you can support me on Patreon. Thanks again, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a nice day.